Welcome to Study Session 7, Trade Dispute. Introduction. In the previous study session, we examined sources of industrial conflict. Conflict in every organization is inevitable. It is expressed in several forms. One of such forms is trade. Let us explore the concepts, sources, and forms of trade disputes in this study session. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to define trade dispute, mention sources of trade dispute, list types of trade disputes. What are trade disputes? Trade dispute is defined by the Trade Disputes Act 1976, subsection 37, as any dispute between employers and workers, or between workers and workers, which is connected with the employment or non-employment, or the term of employment and physical conditions of work of any person. From the definition above, two issues are paramount from the definition. First, what constitutes the subject matter of a trade dispute, and second, those that are parties to a trade dispute are. Let us look at some issues that constitute subject matters. A. Employment or non-employment of any person. B. The terms of employment of any person, contract or employment, and issues such as matters relating to wage rates, hours of work, grading and promotion, redundancy procedures. C. The physical conditions of work of any person. This is connected with the physical conditions under which a worker works, especially relating to safety and health matters. An explicit look at the parties to a trade dispute shows that it involves disputes either between employers and workers or between workers and workers. The implication is that there cannot be a trade dispute unless there are workers on one or both sides of the dispute. It is important to let the students know that workers need not belong to any union before trade dispute can occur, nor employers belong to an association before being involved in trade dispute. This is so because Section 37 made no reference to such associations, but in practice both workers and or employee form associations to pursue their demands, trade disputes, whenever they arose. This is confirmed by the case involving Western Textile Industries Co. Limited versus Ado Ekiti, West Tex Inco Workers, Union, 1979, NICLR 107, 1978 to 79, page 111. Trade disputes arise as a result of inherent opposing interests of employers and employees in work relations. Trade disputes are those disputes between workers and employers. The workers may choose to be represented by one organization or another. The primary right, however, to be a party to a trade dispute belongs to the workers on the one hand and the employers on the other hand. Contrary to the argument that has been canvassed for the trade union, the right of appearance before this court belongs to the workers. The trade unions are only the representatives of the workers. When, therefore, a trade union is extinguished by operation of law, such as the situation that arose as a result of the trade unions, Amendment Decree number 22 of 1978. The trade union's rights may or may not be extinguished, but it must be emphasized that the rights of the workers, who are the real parties in a trade dispute, are not extinguished. It is therefore perfectly in order for the new industrial union under which the workers are regrouped to apply to this court to represent the interest of the affected workers. Sources of trade dispute. Sources of trade disputes can therefore emanate from workers' willingness to be recognized, seeking for satisfaction, fair wages and salaries, job security, redressing of the wrong, and good working conditions. The difference in the attainment of these objectives or the interpretations by employees through their union and the employer leads to trade disputes. Furthermore, changes and rapid process of adaptation which the enterprise at times has to undergo in order to survive affect members of the work community in many different ways that they become source of conflict. Iwuji, 1987. Trade disputes in industrial relations are normal and necessary. Trade disputes maintain the system in some state of equilibrium through enterprise efficiency, employee security, and protection of public interest. An example is the forcing down of petroleum product prices by trade union during the Obasanjo regime of 1999 to 2007 to the best interest of the public. Furthermore, workers' trade disputes have secured shorter working hours, longer holidays, maternity leave for women too, safe working conditions, but it has its negative effect of labor turnover, poor workers, work stoppages, loss of man days, and increase in labor costs. There are broadly two kinds of dispute in industry: disputes of interest or conflicts of interest, and rights disputes. The disputes of interest concern conflicts in collective bargaining arising out of the making of new agreements on terms and conditions of work or the renewal of those which have expired, while rights disputes are those which involve alleged violations of rights already established in employment contracts or agreements. The disputes of interest could be compounded by rights disputes. For example, an award made by wages commissions often complicate previous grading, fringe benefits and procedures negotiated and laid down within individual enterprises. A majority of disputes may rightly be regarded as coming under rights dispute, as these inevitably arise in the course of daily production processes in enterprises. Otobo, 2005. What comprises rights disputes at any point in time will depend on, among other factors, the production process, nature of work group directly affected, and strategies of management. It is generally the case that such disputes rarely occur in the administrative sections of most enterprises, which tend to handle correspondence and related matters. In engineering, heavy industries, and other production processes involving mass production techniques, car assembly, electronics, mining, etc., right disputes would frequently occur given established patterns of work, custom, and practice, and various agreements on manning of tasks, piece rate system of payment, and overtime rates. In these industries, occupational categories and identities have been firmly established, making it difficult for management to shift workers around anyhow or impose new work methods or manning without due consultation and compensation. Types of disputes. There are various types of disputes. These include intrapersonal disputes or grievances. This is exemplified by a worker's protest against a disciplinary measure, non-promotion, termination of appointment, maltreatment by superior, improper grading or wrongful change in job classification or title, etc. These are right grievances. Interpersonal disputes. These disputes arise from disagreement between two individuals in the workplace. This might be on issues of interest and rights in the workplace. These comprise attitudes, belief, and value systems of the individual negotiators or officials on both sides, which significantly influence the state of labor relations. Quite often, such conflicts are erroneously taken as legitimate issues of labor relations. Thus, leaders, especially on the union's side, are often at pains to distinguish between personality and labor management dispute, which do manifest in unions asking for the removal of an official whom they do not get along with. Interdepartmental disputes. This is evidence between departments in the workplace. This might be premised on the issues of distribution of materials, assigning responsibilities, sharing of privileges and opportunities, etc. Intra-union disputes. These are disputes arising from the organization and running of a trade union as laid down in the union constitution. Such matters as the propriety or otherwise of political or other affiliation and complaints arising from election into union offices will certainly come within this subhead of disputes. Inter-union disputes. These disputes arise from the restructuring of trade unions. Disputes on the proper union that can unionize certain categories of workers are included in this class of disputes. This dispute is usually between two or more trade unions with jurisdiction to hear and determine matters conferred on the Industrial Arbitration Panel (IAP) and National Industrial Court (NIC). Labor management dispute. This manifests where there is disagreement on issues of the implementation of collective agreement between the union and management. It could be premised on interpretation of collective agreement or any other issue affecting either the union or management. Forms of industrial actions. Strike is the most popular form of industrial action in any society. There are other forms which do not attract much notice or public attention. This latter category accounts for a significant proportion of labor management disputes. These other forms of industrial actions are used by workers and their unions as pressure methods on the employer to win their demands. In many cases, non-strike actions serve as the first phase of an action package that ultimately ends up in a strike. 7 types of action in this category can be identified. 1. Work to rule. 2. Overtime ban. 3. Lock in and out. 4. Intimidation. And 5. Lockout. 6. Sit-ins and walk-ins. 7. Picketing. Work to rule. This aims at the restriction of output through deliberate reduction in the piece of work. Work to rule, popularly referred to as go slow. Actions are featured prominently in labor management relations for a long time, although they became a regular instrument of union bargaining strategy following the no-strike provision of the wartime legislation. Although we have no hard evidence on the extent of its use, work to rule is by far the most common form of industrial action in Nigeria. The overtime ban. This is a union strategy which seeks to impose additional cost on the employer if more production is needed. Overtime ban is an effective means of securing the employer's concession. This strategy is frequently used in the banking industry, where normal work usually continues for several hours after the close of banking services to the public. It is at this time that the various books are reconciled or balanced, where, however, the union embarks on overtime ban. This has a disruptive effect on efficiency. A variation of this method is the refusal to work at weekends or holiday periods. They lock in and out. This is an action in which employees physically take over the company premises, either by locking in or locking out the management staff, thus denying them access to or exit from the premises. Unlike the first two forms, work to rule and overtime ban, this action is often an indication of extremely unhealthy labor relations, which sometimes suggest excessive use of union power. Intimidation. It aims at putting the employer in a bad light by doing things which are embarrassing or antithetical to normal work behavior. This form of industrial action is a more recent phenomenon and now commonly used in public-oriented organizations. For example, unit of the National Union in a major bank in central Lagos on one occasion protested the unbearable heat in the office and asked for the provision of an air conditioner. Because management did not give the problem due attention, a few of the workers removed their clothes in full view of the perplexed customers. This act proved too embarrassing to management and the air conditioning system was installed immediately. In 1990, members of NUBIFIE throughout the country wore tattered dresses and masks to work in order to protest poor working conditions in banks. Fasoyin, 1992. The lockout. This is the employer's counterpart of the strike. The company gates are locked, thereby preventing workers from entering the company's premises. Lockouts are not a common occurrence in labor management relations in Nigeria. In fact, it appears that most lockouts that occurs are preceded by a strike or other forms of industrial action. Oftentimes, when workers embark on an action and the management or the third-party intervention has failed to resolve it, the employer might find it expedient to lock out the workers, either to reduce overhead costs or to safeguard life and property. For this reason, it is not usually easy to separate the two phenomena in labor relations. Sit-ins and walk-ins. There are mass occupations of employers' premises by disaffected workers. During work, employees continue production with the aim of demonstrating that the plant is a viable concern. In the case of a sit-in, which often takes place where the production processes make a prolonged work impossible, the aim is to protest against a management decision, whilst in the case of a proposed closure, preventing the transfer of plant and machinery to other factories. IPM 1976. Two main characteristics of sit-ins and walk-ins are: 1. The illegal occupation of an employer's premises against his wishes. 2. Exercising of countervailing control over the establishment by the occupiers. These tactics are forward in preference to other forms of organized industrial actions by trade unionists because A. They offer some degree of control over the establishment being occupied, which is obviously important in redundancy situations where the removal of plant and machinery to other locations is being threatened. B. Since such actions take place on private property, it reduces the likelihood of conflict with the police. C. Employees are better able to maintain their morale and group solidarity, Fan Am and Pimlot, 1979. Picketing. This is the physical conduct of strikes and the rights of strikers to assemble, to communicate information and to persuade others to help or to join them. In most strikes, it is a common practice for the unions to appoint official pickets to stand outside the workplace where the dispute is taking place. This is done to make it clear to employees, management, the public, and other workers delivering or collecting goods and materials there that a strike is in progress. Picketing hour permits strikers not to use physical force, that people and vehicles are not stopped against their will, and that their conduct does not threaten a breach of the peace in the eyes of the police. Picketing is also confined to those employees directly involved in the dispute and to their place of work, or to a clearly connected establishment. Study session summary. In this study session, we introduce the meaning of trade dispute. We learn about sources of trade disputes, disputes of interest and disputes of rights. Also other forms of industrial actions like work to rule, overtime ban, lock-in and out, sit-ins and walk-ins, picketing, intimidation, etc. were looked at. End of study session 7. Thank you for listening.